A terrified young woman grabbed the pillow from behind her head and hurled it across the room, screaming that it was trying to kill her. The pillow hit the wall and dropped to the floor, and for 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then the charge nurse stepped forward, voice already wrapped in the particular brand of professional condescension reserved for patients who made scenes, and said, "Sweetheart, it's a pillow." The patient pressed herself against the headboard, knees pulled to her chest, pointing at the thing on the floor like it had teeth. And standing in the doorway, watching all of it, was a nurse named Mara Solis, who noticed something everyone else in that room had already decided not to see. A faint redness along the left side of the patient's neck, angry and fresh, shaped in a pattern that had nothing to do with anxiety. If this story already has you leaning forward, stay with me until the very end, and drop a like so more people can find this. Leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Harlow Valley Medical Center sat on the eastern edge of Creston Falls, Oregon, a mid-sized city that existed in the particular kind of quiet that people from larger places called peaceful and locals called forgotten. The hospital was 11 stories of glass and reinforced concrete, built in the early 90s and renovated twice since, the kind of institution that had plaques in the lobby and a reputation it guarded more carefully than it guarded its patients. It had a 4-star rating on the state health registry. It had a gala every spring. It had a director of patient experience whose entire job was making sure the public never heard anything that might interrupt the institution's carefully maintained image of competence. Mara Solis had worked on the surgical recovery floor for 2 years, long enough to know where the supply closets with broken locks were, long enough to know which attending physicians washed their hands without being reminded, and which ones needed to be watched, long enough to have learned that at Harlow Valley, the hierarchy was not just professional. It was personal. It was in the way people looked at you when you spoke. It was in the meetings where your name was the last one mentioned, if it was mentioned at all. She was 29 years old. She had a face people described as calm, which was not a compliment in a place that valued performance. She wore her dark hair pulled back in the same low knot every shift, kept her badge visible, kept her voice level even when the situation in front of her was anything but. She did not complain loudly. She did not push herself into conversations where she hadn't been invited. She did what she was there to do. Checked vitals, updated charts, administered medications, caught the things that fell through cracks. And she went home. Most people on the floor had constructed a version of Mara in their heads and stopped paying attention once they felt satisfied with the picture. She was quiet. She was competent in the unremarkable sense of the word. She was easy to overlook. That was by design, entirely fine with her. The patient in room 414 had been admitted 6 days ago under the name Lily Hartman, 18 years old, transferred from a smaller urgent care clinic in a town 40 minutes south of Creston Falls, after presenting with what was initially described as an acute anxiety episode with accompanying skin irritation. Her chart was a document of professional dismissal stretched across 7 pages. Patient reports sensation of burning during sleep. Psychiatric consult ordered. No dermatological abnormality confirmed. Then 2 days later, patient continues to report discomfort. Anxiety symptoms persist. Medication adjusted. The notes were thorough in their thoroughness and empty in every way that mattered. Mara had been assigned to Lily Hartman's room twice in the past week. The first time, she had done what the chart told her to do: vitals, medication, brief check-in, and left. The second time, 3 days ago, she had stayed a few minutes longer than necessary because Lily had looked at her with the specific exhaustion of someone who had been not believed for so long they'd stopped expecting anything else. "It happens every night," Lily had said. "Not frantic, just tired. When I wake up, my neck hurts, it burns, and there's something in the pillow. I know how that sounds." "Walk me through it," Mara had said. Lily had blinked. "You want me to explain it again?" "I want you to explain it to me. Not to the chart. To me." That conversation had lasted 11 minutes. Mara had listened to all of it. Tonight was different. Mara was 2 hours into her shift, moving down the hall with a medication tray, when the scream reached her from behind the closed door of 414. Not a scream of pain exactly. Something rawer than that. The kind of sound a person makes when their body has finally bypassed reason and gone straight to alarm. Mara set the tray on the nearest surface and moved. She pushed into the room to find Lily against the headboard, the pillow on the floor near the window, and the charge nurse, Patricia Weller, already standing at the foot of the bed with her arms crossed, and her expression locked into the particular configuration that meant she had already decided what was happening here. "I told you," Lily was saying, voice shaking, "every night, every single night." "Lily." Patricia's voice had the professional softness of someone who had learned that lowering your volume could substitute for lowering your defenses. "Nobody is hurting you. The pillow is hospital-issued linen. Then why does my neck feel like this?" Lily tilted her head and pulled aside her hospital gown at the collar, exposing the left side of her neck. Mara saw it from the doorway. She moved closer. The irritation was angrier than 3 days ago, a pattern of small, clustered marks. Some of them raised, faint but unmistakable, running from behind the ear down toward the shoulder. Not a rash. Not hives. The spacing was too deliberate. The distribution was too consistent. "Patricia," Mara said. "Have you looked at her neck?" Patricia turned. Her expression did not change. "I've reviewed the chart." "The chart doesn't show what I'm looking at right now." There was a silence. The kind of silence that in other rooms might have meant someone was reconsidering. In this room, it meant the charge nurse was recalibrating how to dismiss the thing being said to her. "Mara," Patricia kept her voice pleasant. "Doctor, Ashford has signed off on this case twice this week. The psychiatric consult is pending. Our job is to keep the patient calm, not to create additional anxiety by validating." "I'm not talking about validating her feelings," Mara said. "I'm talking about a physical finding that isn't in the chart." She looked at Lily. "Can I take a closer look?" Lily nodded immediately. Mara pulled on gloves and examined the marks with a penlight. Up close, they were even more distinct. The pattern had a specific character. Not contact dermatitis, not an allergic response with the typical irregular spread. These were focal points, discrete, as if something with structure had made repeated contact with the same area. "How long have you been on the hospital pillow?" Mara asked. "Since day one," Lily said. "They took my one from home. They said it was a hygiene protocol." "Has the pillow been changed?" "They said they changed it, but it looks the same." Mara looked at the pillow on the floor. Standard hospital issue. White cover, institutional pillowcase, laundering tag visible at the seam. Nothing visibly wrong with it. But the weight, sitting there against the baseboard, looked slightly different from the spare on the other side of the bed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice if you were looking. She picked it up. "That's not necessary," Patricia said. "I'm just moving it off the floor." Mara held it in both hands. It was heavier. Not by a lot, but by enough. She set it carefully on the rolling table near the window. Patricia was already pulling out her phone, which meant she was either checking a message or preparing to escalate this to someone above both of them. Mara made a note of the time, 9:47 p.m., and went back to Lily. "Has anyone else from the staff come in here outside of scheduled check-ins?" she asked. Lily hesitated. "Take your time." "There's a man," Lily said. "I don't know his name. He doesn't wear a doctor's coat. He's got a badge, but I couldn't read it. The font's small. He comes in sometimes at night. He says he's checking the room setup." She paused. "He always touches the pillows." Mara kept her face neutral. "What does he look like?" Lily described him. Mid-50s, close-cropped gray hair, a slight build, a way of moving through the room that didn't match the usual rhythm of staff who were busy. Too deliberate, too unhurried. "Thank you," Mara said. Patricia was off her phone now and moving toward the door with the purposeful energy of someone who had made a decision. "I'll have Dr. Ashford paged to review. Mara, please finish your medication rounds." It was not a suggestion. Mara finished her rounds. She documented the neck findings precisely and completely in her own notes, not in the official chart, because she knew that adding to an attending's chart without authorization would give administration a procedural reason to discard everything she'd written. She kept her notes in a separate document on her personal tablet, time-stamped, detailed enough to be useful later. She had learned, in a different context entirely, how to document in conditions where the documentation might be the only thing that survived. That was not a part of her life she talked about at Harlow Valley. At 10:20 p.m., she pulled up the staff directory and cross-referenced the physical description Lily had given her against non-clinical staff assigned to the surgical recovery floor. She was not supposed to have access to that directory from a nursing workstation, but she had memorized the login process for the facilities management system during her first month on the floor from watching a maintenance coordinator log in while she waited for him to finish so she could ask him about a broken IV stand. She found the name in 11 minutes. Marcus Tolliver, Environmental Services Technician, assigned to floors 3 through 5. Badge photo matched Lily's description. Shift schedule showed him on rotation for nights, specifically the 11 to 7 window. He was currently in the building. Mara closed the screen, leaned back in her chair, and thought for a moment about what to do next. She was not impulsive. She had never been. One of the things her former commanding officer had said about her, not in a compliment exactly, more in the way people describe a quality they find useful but slightly unsettling, was that she processed faster than she reacted, which meant that by the time she acted, she had already run the scenario forward several moves. It was a useful quality in a field hospital. It was useful now. She pulled up the security footage access system. What she found was that cameras on the 4th floor, specifically the hall camera covering the stretch between the elevator bank and room 414, had shown 9 hours of footage for the past 3 days. And of those 9 hours, 2 distinct 40-minute windows per night had been replaced with what the system labeled as maintenance buffer, scheduled calibration, not recorded over, marked as calibrated, which meant someone had flagged those windows in the system as technical maintenance when there was no maintenance order attached to them. Mara made a note of all 3 dates and the times. She was still sitting at the workstation when she heard Patricia's voice in the hallway, louder than it needed to be, coming toward her. Completely out of line, and I want it documented that I flagged this before she caused any additional disruption. The second voice was one Mara recognized without needing to see the face. Harrison Cole, the director of patient care operations, a man who had been at Harlow Valley for 19 years and had developed, over those 19 years, a manner that was so thoroughly confident it had crossed the line into something else entirely. He was tall, silver-haired, and had the specific skill of making eye contact in a way that communicated that he was looking through you rather than at you. He came through the hallway and stopped at the workstation where Mara was sitting. "Mara." He said her name like it was a mild inconvenience. "Patricia tells me you've been inserting yourself into a patient case outside your assigned documentation duties." "I documented a physical finding during a patient interaction," she said. "That's within my duties." "The finding has been reviewed by the attending." "The attending reviewed the chart from 2 days ago. The finding I'm describing happened tonight, and it's more pronounced than what's in the chart." Cole's expression was the controlled version of someone who wanted to sigh. "I'm going to be direct with you, because I think direct is what this situation requires." He leaned against the counter. "Lily Hartman is a complicated case. She has documented anxiety. She has a family history of..." He glanced at Patricia as if confirming he was remembering the right details. "Somatic symptom disorder. The clinical team has a plan in place. When nursing staff..." "I'm not challenging the clinical plan," Mara said. "I'm saying that what's on her neck right now doesn't look like a somatic response. And you're qualified to make that determination because I've seen contact injury patterns before." She held his gaze. "And this one has structure." Cole straightened up. Something shifted in the way he was standing. Not anger exactly, but the particular posture of someone who had decided the conversation was over and was now managing the closing of it. "Finish your shift," he said. "Don't enter 414 again tonight unless you're called. And I would strongly recommend that whatever you've been writing in that tablet stays where it is and doesn't become a problem for anyone." He walked away. Patricia walked with him. Mara sat for a moment. Then she opened her tablet and kept writing. What? The rest of the shift moved in the way shifts do when you're watching for something. Each hour distinct, each interaction sharpened by the thing you're waiting for but cannot force. She checked on her other patients. She answered call lights. She did the work. She did not go back to 414. At 2:14 a.m., she was charting at the nurses' station when she heard footsteps in the hallway that didn't belong to any of the current night staff. She had already memorized the rhythm of each of them without meaning to, the way she used to memorize patrol patterns. These were deliberate, unhurried, the specific cadence of someone moving through a space they believed was empty enough not to bother watching. She did not look up from the workstation. She let her eyes track via the reflection in the dark window to her left. Marcus Tolliver, in his facilities badge and uniform, carrying a folded blanket in one arm, moved past the station toward the end of the hall, toward 414. Mara glanced at the clock. 2:16 a.m. She noted it. She stayed where she was for 90 seconds, counting, and then she stood up, walked to the supply alcove beside the nurse's station, and pulled out her tablet. She typed the time. She typed the name. She typed what she had seen. Then she walked, not running, down the hall to 414. She pushed the door open quietly. The room was lit only by the monitoring equipment and the thin wash of ambient light from the window. Lily was asleep, or appeared to be. Tolliver was standing at the far side of the bed near the headboard, in the act of positioning something. He heard her. He turned. "Evening," he said, voice completely even. "Just doing the overnight room check. At 2 a.m. We rotate." He smiled. It did not reach anything above the mouth. Pillow comfort assessment. Some patients find the standard filling too dense. Is that a documented protocol? It's a standard facilities procedure. He was already moving toward the door, blanket tucked back under his arm. All in the system. "I'll check," she said. He paused. One beat. "Have a good night." He left. Mara stood in the doorway until she heard the elevator. Then she moved to Lily's bed. The pillow at the headboard had been switched. The one Mara had moved to the rolling table earlier, the one that was heavier, was gone. In its place was a different pillow, lighter, standard weight. She checked the rolling table. Empty. She moved fast. Down the hall, stairwell door, 2 flights down to the 3rd floor, faster than the elevator. The 3rd floor was quieter, different unit, lower census at this hour. She moved through the corridor toward the facilities management storage area at the back of the building. She was 20 feet from the storage room door when she saw Tolliver disappearing through it. She stopped. 30 seconds. Listened. He came back out with a laundry cart. The pillow nowhere visible. He saw her, and this time he didn't smile. "You're out of your unit," he said. "So are you," she said. "Technically." They looked at each other across 20 feet of fluorescent-lit corridor. "Have a good night," he said again, and pushed the laundry cart toward the service elevator. Mara pulled out her tablet, took a photo of the service elevator doors closing, noted the time, noted the cart. She walked back upstairs. She went back to the nursing station. She sat down, and she thought about the pillow. The one that was heavier, the one with the different fill, the one that had been in Lily's room every night while Lily woke up with burning marks on her neck. And she thought about how she had 3 days of gap in the security footage and the specific way Lily had said he always touches the pillows. At 3:30 a.m., she pulled up the county property records and cross-referenced Marcus Tolliver's employment start date at Harlow Valley against public records she was able to access through the hospital's administrative research terminal, which was a system she technically should not have been using, but which used the same login structure as the facilities directory. Tolliver had come to Harlow Valley 3 months after Lily Hartman's father had been publicly named in a Navy Board of Inquiry proceeding, a proceeding that had received a paragraph in the Creston Falls Courier and which Mara had found in 19 minutes of searching. She leaned back in her chair. She thought about what that meant and what it would take to make anyone believe it, and who she could contact that would have both the authority and the motivation to act. Then she thought about a name, a specific name, a rank. She sat with that thought for a while because it was not a small decision. It was the kind of decision that collapsed the careful, ordinary life she had been building here. The quiet floor, the manageable shift, the nobody notices me equilibrium she had spent 2 years maintaining. She thought about Lily Hartman asleep in room 414 with a fresh set of marks on her neck. She thought about the new pillow, the lighter one, already positioned at the headboard, and what would happen tomorrow night when Tolliver came back and swapped it again. At 4:47 a.m., Mara Solis took out her personal phone, not the hospital-issued one, and she dialed a number that was not in any directory. It rang twice. A man's voice answered, careful and alert in the way that people who have spent years in a specific kind of work are always alert, even at whatever time it was wherever he was. "This is Mara," she said. A pause, then, "Solis." Another pause. "I thought you were done with all of this." "I am," she said. "This is different. I need you to listen." She told him about Lily Hartman. She told him about the pillow. She told him about Marcus Tolliver and the employment date, and the Navy board proceeding, and the 3 gaps in the security footage, and the way Harrison Cole had looked at her when he told her to keep her notes where they were. When she finished, there was silence on the line. "Who's the father?" the man said. She told him. This time the silence was different in kind. "Mara." His voice had changed in the way that voices change when someone has just reclassified a situation. "You're sure about the timeline?" "I'm sure about everything I documented. The rest is inference." "Your inference?" "Yes." Another silence. "Don't touch the new pillow. Don't let anyone remove it from the room." "I'm off shift at 7. "Get back on that floor before then," he said. "I'll make some calls." He hung up. Mara held the phone for a moment. Then she put it in her pocket and walked back to the nursing station and sat down with her tablet and kept writing, because whatever happened next, she was going to make sure the record of this was complete. The hallway was quiet. The monitors beeped softly in each room. Somewhere down the corridor, a patient's call light blinked amber, and she stood up and went to answer it because that was still her job, and she was still here, and there was still 2 hours and 12 minutes left in her shift. In room 414, Lily Hartman slept. The new pillow rested at the headboard, undisturbed, its contents unknown to everyone in the building except the man who had placed it there. And now the nurse who had spent the last 6 hours becoming certain that nobody in this hospital was going to do a single thing about it, unless someone made them. Mara walked back to the station, sat down, pulled up the staff schedule for the morning, made note of who was coming on, who would have access to 414 before she could intercept anyone, who might be the problem, and who might be useful. She had her notes. She had her timestamps. She had a phone call already in motion. And somewhere on a different floor, Marcus Tolliver was pushing a laundry cart toward a service elevator, and inside that cart, if she was right about everything, was the only physical evidence that any of this had ever happened. She had until morning to make sure it didn't disappear. She had until morning to make sure it didn't disappear. That was the only clear thought left. Not a plan exactly, more a deadline imposed by physics. The laundry cart was already in the service elevator. The pillow was already somewhere inside it. If Tolliver made it to the loading dock or the incinerator room before 7, whatever evidence she believed was in that pillow would stop existing, and she would have nothing but a stack of timestamps and a phone call that had happened at 4:47 a.m. and could not be proven without a phone she was not supposed to have used. She stood up. The right thing, the institutional thing, the thing a reasonable person operating within the appropriate channels would do, was to call the house supervisor and report what she had seen and let the chain of command handle it. She had tried the chain of command at 10:15 p.m. and it had told her to finish her shift and keep her notes to herself. So she moved. Down the hall, not running, because running in a hospital at 5 in the morning is the kind of thing that gets noticed. And getting noticed right now would give someone a reason to intercept her before she got to where she needed to be. She took the main stairwell to the second floor because the service elevator required a facilities badge to operate and would only open at the loading dock or the storage corridor, both of which were on 2. She pushed through the stairwell door and into the quieter corridor. The loading dock access was at the far end. The storage corridor branched left. She stood at the junction for a moment, listening. The elevator hummed, then stopped. She went left. The storage corridor was a long, narrow space that smelled of industrial detergent and clean linen. There were shelves of folded supplies on both sides, a single overhead strip light buzzing faintly. At the far end, double doors led to the loading dock. She was 30 feet from them when one of the doors swung inward and Marcus Tolliver came through it, pushing the empty laundry cart. He stopped. So did she. The cart between them was empty, which meant the contents had already been moved to the dock, or to a truck, or somewhere beyond the door she was now 30 feet from. "You followed me," he said. Not a question. "I was doing a floor check." "You're on 4. "I float," she said, which was technically true. He looked at her with the careful assessment of someone running calculations. Not panicked. That was the thing that registered first. Calculated. Whatever he was doing, he had done it before, or something like it. Enough times that an unexpected witness in a storage corridor at 5 in the morning was a variable to be managed rather than a crisis. "You should go back to your floor," he said. "You should tell me where the pillow went." Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite surprise. More like the specific recognition of a person who has misjudged the situation they're in. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time, and she watched him recalibrate. "I don't know what pillow you're talking about," he said. "The one from room 414. The one you swapped out at 2:16 a.m. That's a serious accusation." "It's a documented observation," she said. "Times, descriptions, photographs of the service elevator doors. All of it written down with timestamps that I didn't generate myself." He was quiet for 3 seconds. The laundry cart sat between them, like a mediator nobody had asked for. Then he said, "You don't know what you're involved in. Then explain it to me." "Go back to your floor, nurse." He glanced at her badge. "Solis, go back, finish your shift, and let this go. That's not a threat. That's the best advice anyone is going to give you tonight." He pushed the cart past her, shoulder angling to keep distance, and moved toward the main corridor. She let him go. She went to the loading dock door and pushed through it. The dock was cold. Oregon at 5 in the morning, the air carrying the wet grass smell of whatever was growing in the dark beyond the parking structure. 2 fleet vehicles were backed up to the bay. A white transit van, engine off, and a facilities truck with the hospital logo on the side. Neither had a driver in it that she could see. She moved to the van. The rear doors were unlocked. She pulled one open. Inside there were 4 large laundry bags, cinched and tagged with facilities routing labels. And on top of one of them, not bagged, not tagged, just sitting there in the ambient cold, a pillow in a white hospital case. She looked at it for a moment. Then she took her phone out, photographed it in context, photographed the van interior, the other bags, the routing labels on the bags closest to the pillow. She photographed the van's license plate before she closed the door. She went back inside before anyone came. Well, at 5:20 a.m., she was back at the nursing station on 4, charting with the meticulous precision of someone who was building a record that would need to hold up under examination. She wrote everything: the corridor, the cart, the loading dock, the van, the pillow sitting loose on top of the laundry bags. She noted the temperature. She noted which lights were on. She noted that the van's registration sticker, visible in the driver's side window, was due for renewal. She was 3 pages into the new section of notes when her phone buzzed. A text from the number she'd called at 4:47 a.m. 4 words: "Stay on that floor." Which meant the calls had already started, which meant whatever was coming was already in motion. She put the phone away and went to check on Lily. The room was quiet. Lily was awake, sitting up, the new pillow pushed to the far edge of the bed and replaced with a rolled blanket she'd propped against the headboard herself. "You're still here," Lily said. "My shift ends at 7. "You look like you've been up all night." "I have been," Mara said, and pulled a chair to the side of the bed. "How's your neck?" Lily touched it reflexively. "Same. Maybe a little less. The new pillow hasn't been against my neck yet." She paused. "Did something happen?" Mara looked at her. Lily was 18, and she had been in this hospital for 6 days. And in those 6 days, she had been told by physicians and administrators and her own family that what she was experiencing was happening inside her head, and she had kept insisting anyway with the stubborn, exhausting courage of someone who knows what they felt and refuses to surrender it to someone else's more authoritative interpretation. "I'm looking into some things," Mara said. "I need you to do something for me." "Okay." "Don't let anyone change your pillow today. If someone comes in and tries to switch it, tell them you want to keep the current one. If they insist, call the call light immediately." Lily was quiet. Then, "You found something." "I found enough to keep looking." "That's not nothing," Lily said. "No," Mara agreed. "It's not nothing." She left the room at 6:10 a.m., 45 minutes before shift end. She went to the nurse's station and made one more entry in her notes, and then sat with her coffee. The second one, bitter by now, the carafe having been on the heating element for 3 hours, and thought about the day ahead. She had not slept. She would not sleep for a while yet. The morning shift came on at 7 with the usual overlap, departing nurses doing handoffs, new faces at the station, the particular energy of people who had slept and eaten in the last several hours and moved through the world accordingly. Mara handed off her other patients, gave clean and detailed reports on each of them, and said nothing about Lily Hartman that wasn't already in the chart. She said nothing about Tolliver. She said nothing about the loading dock. She was pulling on her jacket at the staff locker room when Patricia Weller appeared in the doorway. Patricia looked like she had also been up longer than her shift accounted for, which was interesting. "Harrison wants to see you," Patricia said. "I'm off shift." "He knows. He said before you leave." Mara zipped her jacket. "Where?" "His office, 5th floor." She followed Patricia up 1 floor, through the administrative wing, past the secretary who did not make eye contact, and into Harrison Cole's office, which was a room that communicated authority through the specific combination of corner windows, mahogany desk surface, and the wall of framed commendations that she estimated had been strategically arranged to be visible from the door. Cole was standing when she came in. That was the first indication. "Close the door," he said. She did. "Sit down." She remained standing, not as a power move. She was tired, and standing felt more alert. "I have somewhere to be." He looked at her across the desk with an expression that was working very hard to remain composed. "You were in the service corridor at 5 a.m. I was doing a check. You were following a facilities employee. I saw someone I recognized from another floor, and I went the same direction. That's not following." Cole sat down. He put both hands flat on the desk in the way people do when they're trying to project calm they don't entirely feel. "Mara, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as a professional courtesy, not as a directive, because I think you're a capable nurse, and I'd like this conversation to remain," he chose the word carefully, "collegial." "Go ahead," she said. "You have made, in the past 12 hours, 3 separate incursions into matters that are outside your clinical scope. You have accessed staff directories without authorization. You have been in areas outside your unit, and you have made documented allegations about a patient case that has been cleared twice by the attending physician." He paused. "I'm not here to fire you. I'm here to make sure you understand the position you're putting yourself in." "I appreciate that," she said. "Harlow Valley has a formal complaint process. If you have concerns about patient care, that process exists for a reason. I filed a concern at shift start. It went to Patricia. She escalated it to you. You told me to keep my notes to myself." The muscle in his jaw moved. "That's not what I said." "It's what I documented that you said." Another silence. This one had a different texture. Not the controlled management of an administrator dealing with a difficult staff member, but something tighter. She had been in enough situations where she needed to read rooms quickly that she recognized the difference between someone managing you and someone being managed by something you couldn't see. Cole was nervous, not about her, specifically, about something adjacent to her. "I'd like you to take some time off," he said. "Starting today, paid leave. Think of it as, am I suspended? No, it's discretionary leave. Your choice. Then I'd prefer to keep my regular schedule," she said. "I'll see you Thursday." She left before he could respond. Chance. She did not go home. She drove to a diner 6 blocks from the hospital, a place with vinyl booths and coffee that came out of a regular pot, and a waitress who called everyone Han without inflection. And she sat in the back corner and ate eggs that she didn't particularly taste and thought about what Cole had been afraid of. Not her. She was a floor nurse with a tablet full of notes and a phone call she'd made at 4:47 a.m. That wasn't enough to make an administrator with 19 years in the building put both hands on his desk and offer discretionary paid leave at 7 in the morning. Something else was already happening. Her phone buzzed again. The same number. Hartman's father has been notified. Federal coordination is active. Do not contact the patient's family directly. Do not make any additional moves until you hear from us. She read it twice. Then she put the phone down and drank her coffee. Federal coordination. That was a specific phrase. That was not the phrase of someone making informal calls to retired Navy contacts. That was the phrase of someone who had picked up the phone, said the right things to the right people, and had those right people already in motion, which meant the phone call she'd made at 4:47 a.m. had landed somewhere with real weight. She had not told the man on the other end everything about herself. She hadn't needed to. The weight of what she'd said was enough. He knew her well enough to know that when she called and said, "I'm sure about what I documented," that meant what it meant. She finished eating and drove home. She showered and changed and lay down on her bed for 90 minutes without sleeping, and then got up and drove back toward the hospital because she could not stay away from it, and she was not willing to pretend otherwise. She parked 2 blocks away and walked. The morning shift would be well underway. She wasn't scheduled. She could not go onto the floor without a reason. She sat in the hospital lobby, a public space, open to visitors, full of the particular ambient sadness of people waiting for news about other people they loved. And she opened her tablet and reviewed everything she had written. It held together. Every piece of it connected to the next with a logic that didn't require her to stretch anything. The marks on Lily's neck, the pillow weight, the security footage gaps, Tolliver's timeline at the hospital against the Navy board proceeding, the loading dock, the pillow in the van. What she didn't have was a direct line between Tolliver and Cole. She didn't have proof Cole knew. She had his behavior, the 10:15 p.m. conversation, the morning meeting, the paid leave offer. And behavior was evidence of something, but it could be explained other ways. An administrator protecting the institution from a nurse making noise about a case the attending had signed off on. That was plausible. It was not proof. She needed the pillow. The pillow was in a white transit van on the loading dock, or had been as of 5:05 a.m. It was now 9:40 a.m., which meant 4.5 hours had passed and the van had been unlocked. And if anyone from facilities had gone out to the dock with a reason to move things, the pillow was already gone. She got up and walked to the hospital's main entrance and asked the front desk receptionist, a young woman with the distracted expression of someone managing 3 tasks simultaneously, whether she could speak with the facilities management office. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I work here. I need to report a missing item from a patient room." She was directed to the 2nd floor, facilities annex, which was a room behind a door that said operations in block letters. She knocked. A man she didn't recognize opened it. Younger than Tolliver, broader, with the look of someone who'd been in the middle of something unrelated. "I'm a nurse from 4, she said. "I'm trying to locate a patient's personal item that may have ended up in a laundry pickup by accident." The man, his badge said Devin Marsh, facilities coordinator, looked slightly harassed. "What kind of item?" "A pillow. Patient's personal pillow. White case, standard size. It may have been pulled from room 414 during the overnight." He turned to his computer and typed something. She watched his face. Whatever came up on his screen made him stop typing. He said. "The 414 room report shows we don't have any logged pickup from that room in the overnight window." "Is it possible it was picked up without being logged?" "I mean," he was reading something. "Our loading dock manifest from last night shows 2 van loads outbound, one at 11 p.m., one at 5:15 a.m. He scrolled. The 5:15 manifest was filed by... He stopped. "By who?" she asked. He closed the screen. The expression on his face changed in a way that told her he'd just seen something that connected to something else he already knew about and was now deciding what to do. "I'm going to need to flag this for my supervisor," he said. "Of course," she said. "Can you tell me your supervisor's name?" He hesitated. "Harrison Cole oversees facilities operations." Of course he did. She thanked him and left. In the hallway outside, she leaned against the wall for a moment, phone in hand, and texted the 4:47 a.m. number. "Loading dock manifest. 5:15 a.m. van. Filed by someone who stopped when I was watching. Cole oversees facilities operations directly." The response came back in 4 minutes. "We know. Don't go back in today." She stood in the hallway. She thought about Lily on the 4th floor, awake and waiting, with a rolled blanket instead of a pillow, and a fresh set of marks on her neck that nobody was treating because the people in charge of treating them had decided she was imagining things. She thought about the fact that she had been told, clearly, by the people now coordinating a federal response, not to go back in today. She went back in. She took the stairs to 4, not the elevator, and walked to the nursing station with the specific, purposeful energy of someone who belonged there. The morning charge nurse was Tomas Rivera, 26, second year on the floor, a person who actually paid attention to things. "You're not on today," he said, looking up from his screen. "I know. I need 5 minutes with a patient, 414. Cole's office sent something down this morning, said 414 isn't to receive non-essential visitors." She stopped. "When?" 8:30. I've got the email." He turned his monitor so she could see it. It was from the Patient Care Operations Office, Harrison Cole's domain, distributed to floor charge nurses, citing a patient privacy protocol for room 414 that would remain in effect until further notice. Any non-essential staff contact with the patient required prior written authorization from the attending. It was clean. It was formal. It was exactly the kind of administrative move that, on paper, looked like appropriate patient protection, and was, in fact, a mechanism for keeping Mara away from Lily. "Tomas," she said, "has anyone been in that room this morning?" Dr. Ashford did rounds at 8, and someone from administration. "Who from administration?" He checked the log. It just says Patient Care Operations, no name. She kept her voice even. "Was anything in the room changed?" He looked at her. Tomas was the kind of person who noticed things and was also young enough that he hadn't yet learned the institutional habit of not asking the question the moment suggested. "Mara," he said carefully, "what's going on with 414? "I'm trying to figure that out," she said. "The patient's been pushing the call light a lot this morning. Not for anything specific. I think she's, I don't know, anxious." "Has she asked for me?" He paused. "She asked if you were still working today." Mara stood at the station for a moment, looking at the hallway. The door to 414 was visible from here, closed, ordinary, a room like any other room. "Tomas," she said, "I'm going to ask you to do something." "Okay." "Go in and do a comfort check, standard, and look at the pillow on the headboard. Tell me if it's the same one that was there last night, the rolled blanket setup, or if it's been switched back to a standard pillow." He looked at her for 2 full seconds. Then he stood up and walked down the hall. She waited. He was inside for 3 minutes. When he came back out, he walked back to the station without rushing, sat down, and said quietly, "Standard hospital pillow, no blanket." The pillow had been swapped back. Someone had been in that room this morning, between the shift change and now, and had put a new pillow on the bed. A standard hospital pillow. In a room now under administrative access restriction, which meant either the pillow was clean, brand new, a fresh one from supply, nothing hidden in it, or whatever was in it was already in place before she'd been locked out. Her phone buzzed. Not the 4:47 a.m. number this time. A different number. Oregon area code, local prefix. She didn't recognize it. She answered. "Is this the nurse?" A man's voice. Controlled, precise, with the specific flatness of someone who had spent years speaking in environments where clarity mattered more than tone. "The one who called last night." "Who is this?" "My name is Garrett Hartman," he said. "I think you've been trying to keep my daughter safe." Her hand tightened on the phone. "Mr. Hartman," she said carefully, "I was told not to contact the family directly." "I know," he said. "I'm contacting you. That's different." A brief pause. "I'm 20 minutes from Creston Falls. I have 2 people with me who are not hospital staff and are not local law enforcement. I need to know if my daughter is still in that building." "She is," Mara said. "Is she safe right now?" Mara looked at the closed door of room 414. Thought about the pillow. Thought about what was in it, or wasn't, and whether Lily was sleeping against it right now while they spoke. "I don't know," she said. "I genuinely don't know." And 20 minutes felt in that moment like a very long time. 20 minutes felt like a very long time, and Mara spent the first 4 of them doing the only productive thing available to her, which was walking back to the nursing station, sitting down, and thinking through the geometry of what she knew against what she could actually do. Garrett Hartman was 20 minutes out. He had 2 people with him who were not local law enforcement, which in her experience meant federal, military, or some hybrid of both that didn't advertise itself on business cards. The pillow in room 414 had been swapped back during the administrative lockout window, which meant someone with access to that room during the post-shift gap after Dr. Ashford's rounds, before the access restriction fully propagated to floor staff, had gone in and made the exchange. That was a short window, maybe 40 minutes, maybe less, which meant whoever had done it had been ready, waiting for the right moment, which meant they knew Mara had been on the loading dock, which meant Tolliver had communicated her presence to someone fast enough that a countermove was in place before 8:30 a.m. That was not a slow, bureaucratic machine. That was coordinated. She pulled up the floor access log on the nursing workstation, the electronic record of which staff badges had been used to enter which rooms during which windows. It was not a tool she was supposed to use for rooms outside her assignment, but Tomas was across the station and not watching her screen, and she moved through it quickly. Room 414, access log, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Dr. Ashford at 8:04. Tomas Rivera at 9:43. That was the comfort check she'd sent him on. And at 8:17, a badge access from an ID number that did not correspond to any clinical staff designation she recognized. The suffix on the number was different, a letter she hadn't seen before in a staff ID. She wrote it down. Then she went to find Tomas. "Does this badge designation mean anything to you?" She showed him the handwritten string. He looked at it. "That's an admin override ID. They can access any room in the building. We don't usually see them in the access logs because admin doesn't typically come to the floor directly." He handed the paper back. "They'd use it for something like a VIP patient situation or a security review. Or for a room that's been put under administrative access restriction." "Yeah, I guess." She put the paper in her pocket. 8:17 a.m. The pillow had been exchanged at some point between Ashford's departure and Tomas's check. 13 minutes. Someone with an administrative override badge had been in that room for some portion of those 13 minutes. Her phone buzzed again. The 4:47 a.m. number, ETA, 15 minutes. "Stay visible. Don't go into 414. She read it and thought about that instruction, and about Lily in room 414 with a pillow against her headboard that had been placed there by someone with an administrative override badge at 8:17 in the morning, and she thought about the marks on Lily's neck that were already angrier than 3 days ago. And she thought about envenomation, about what marine stinging filaments could do over repeated low-dose exposure to the neck and upper shoulder, to the lymphatic vessels that ran through that territory. To a young person sleeping against a source of ongoing irritation every night for 6 days. She knew what repeated exposure did. She had treated envenomation injuries in contexts most nurses never encountered. She knew the progression. She knew what happened if you waited another full night. She stood up. "Tomas," she said, "I need you to get the patient in 414 out of that bed." He turned. "Mara." "Not for a test, not for a procedure. Tell her you need to change the bed linens. Get her out of the bed and into the chair. Don't touch the pillow. Don't let her touch the pillow." "I can't just—" "You can," she said. "Linen change is standard care. It doesn't require physician authorization. Do it now." He looked at her for a long 2 seconds. He was young, and he was not entirely sure what was happening, but he was also, she had noticed over 2 years, the kind of person who paid attention to things other people decided not to see. "Okay," he said. He went down the hall. She watched the door of 414 until she saw it open and close behind him. At 10:08 a.m., 2 things happened at approximately the same moment, which would later cause some procedural confusion about the order of events in the official report. The first was that Garrett Hartman walked through the main entrance of Harlow Valley Medical Center with 2 people behind him, a woman in a dark jacket carrying a messenger bag, and a man in civilian clothes whose posture was unmistakably military in the way that certain people carry themselves for the rest of their lives, regardless of what they're wearing. Hartman was in his mid-50s, lean, with the kind of face that had been weathered by something more specific than age. He moved through the lobby like someone who had decided before he walked in exactly where he was going. The second was that Harrison Cole's secretary appeared on the 4th floor, which had never happened in the 2 years Mara had worked there. The secretary, A woman named Brenda, who Mara recognized from the fifth floor administrative wing, came directly to the nursing station with the particular energy of someone delivering a message that had been given to her with urgency but without explanation. "Miss Solis," she said, "Mr. Cole needs you in his office immediately." "I'm not on shift," Mara said. "He's aware of that." "Then I'll see him Thursday." Brenda looked uncertain. She had clearly not been given a contingency for this response. "He said to tell you it was urgent, regarding the situation on this floor." "Which situation?" A pause. "He didn't specify." "Then I'll wait until he does." Mara looked at her phone. The 4:47 a.m. number had just sent one more text. "In the building, coming up." She put the phone in her pocket and looked at Brenda. "You can tell Mr. Cole I'm unavailable." Brenda left, looking like she wished she worked somewhere else. Garrett Hartman found her before anyone from the fifth floor could come down. He came off the elevator with the woman in the dark jacket and the man with military posture, and he walked directly to Mara without looking at any signage, which meant someone had described her to him well enough that he recognized her on sight. "Solis," he said. It was the same way the man on the phone had said her name last night. Not a question, an identification. "Yes," she said. He was quieter in person than the voice on the phone had suggested. Not nervous, just very still, in the way people get when they are managing something large and keeping it internal. "Where is she?" 414. "I have a nurse doing a linen change to get her out of the bed. The pillow." "We know about the pillow." He glanced at the woman beside him. "Dr. Ferris is a toxicologist. We need the pillow intact, unopened, and we need it before anyone else touches it." "Someone already moved it once," Mara said. "It's been swapped in and out at least 3 times. The version currently in the room was placed at 8:17 a.m. by someone with an administrative override badge." Something crossed Hartman's face. Not surprise. Recognition. The specific expression of someone who has suspected something and just received confirmation that the suspicion was right. "Where's Tolliver?" he asked. "I don't know. He was in the building last night. I haven't seen him on shift today." Hartman looked at the man beside him. The man was already on his phone, talking quietly, facing away from the station. "I need to see my daughter," Hartman said. "Room 414, she said. "But, Mr. Hartman—" He was already moving. She went with him. She did not have authorization to be in that room, and she was fully aware of that. And she went anyway. Thomas had gotten Lily into the bedside chair with the efficient diplomacy of someone making an uncomfortable request sound routine. Lily was wrapped in a blanket, her feet on the footrest, and when the door opened and she saw her father come through it, she made a sound that Mara would not have been able to describe accurately if asked. Not quite a cry, not quite a word. Somewhere in the register of a person who has been holding something together for a long time and just saw the reason to stop. Hartman crossed the room and held his daughter, and Mara stood near the door and gave them 45 seconds because that was what the situation required, not because she had unlimited time. "Dad?" Lily said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "They said I was making it up." "I know," he said. "You weren't." "I knew I wasn't." "I know you knew." He pulled back enough to look at her face. His expression was the kind of controlled that requires considerable effort. "Are you hurt?" "My neck. It's been—" She touched the left side. "Every night." He looked at the marks. He was not a physician, and he had probably not been close enough to them before to assess them clinically, but something in the way he looked at them made Mara certain he had seen injuries with this character before, in a different context. Dr. Ferris had moved to the bed. She was examining the pillow on the headboard without touching it, visually, from close range, with a small pen light she'd taken from the messenger bag. "Has this been opened at any point?" she asked. "Not this one," Mara said. "The one I found on the loading dock last night? No. I photographed it in context, but I didn't open it. This is a different pillow, placed this morning." Ferris looked up. "Different pillow. The original one I flagged was removed. This one was swapped in while the room was under administrative access restriction." Ferris and Hartman exchanged a look that covered a lot of ground in less than a second. "That's not accidental," Ferris said. "That's someone who knew we were coming and wanted a clean pillow in the room." "Yes," Mara said, which means the original is already gone. It was in a white transit van on the loading dock at 5:05 a.m. I photographed it. The manifest was filed at 5:15 a.m. I have the name of the facilities coordinator who pulled it up and closed the screen when he saw what was on it. She took her tablet from her bag and pulled up the photographs. The van's plate is in here. Ferris took the tablet and looked. She passed it to Hartman without a word. Hartman looked at the photographs for a long moment. Then he handed the tablet back to Mara and took out his own phone. "Give me 10 minutes, he said to Ferris. He stepped into the hallway. What happened in the next 40 minutes was not smooth. Nothing about it was smooth. It was exactly as complicated as a situation becomes when federal coordination intersects with an active hospital administration that has spent the last 12 hours trying to manage a containment, and when the first person who arrives with institutional authority is not from outside the building, but inside it. Harrison Cole appeared on the 4th floor at 10:34 a.m. He came with 2 men from hospital security. Not aggressive, not in any way that could be characterized as physical, but present in the specific way that communicated he expected their presence to be enough. He stopped at the nursing station first, where Tomas was now sitting with the deliberate, focused attention of someone pretending to chart while listening to everything. "Where is she?" Cole said. Thomas looked up. "Who?" "Solis." "I don't know," Thomas said, which was technically true since he hadn't been watching the door of 414. Cole moved down the hall. He pushed open the door of room 414 and walked in and found Hartman, Ferris, and Mara standing in a room with Lily Hartman in the chair, and his expression went through 3 distinct phases in about 2 seconds. Preparation, contact, recalculation. "This room is under administrative access restriction," he said. He was looking at Mara. "I'm aware," Mara said. "You're not authorized to be here, any of you." He glanced at Hartman and Ferris. "And visiting hours don't begin until—" "Garrett Hartman." Hartman said his own name in a way that was not an introduction, more a statement of position. "Lily's father." "Mr. Hartman, I understand you're concerned about your daughter, but there is a clinical team actively managing her case, and I need you to—" "I've spoken with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service this morning," Hartman said. "There will be investigators here within the hour. I would suggest that whatever you were about to ask me to do, you reconsider." Cole went very still. It was the stillness of someone who has just had the floor shift under them and is calculating whether they can remain standing. "The NCIS has no jurisdiction in a civilian hospital," he said. His voice had changed, not louder, but tighter. "They have jurisdiction over crimes connected to active and former military personnel," Hartman said, "and the U.S. Attorney's Office has agreed that the circumstances here qualify." He looked at Cole with the specific, unornamental directness of someone who has delivered hard information before and learned to strip it of everything except the fact. "You've been contacted this morning by federal agents, Mr. Cole. I know that because I was on the call when that contact was arranged." The security personnel behind Cole had the uncomfortable body language of people who have just realized they are standing in the wrong room for reasons nobody explained to them. Cole looked at Mara. She looked back at him. "You did this," he said. It was not loud. It was almost quiet. "I documented what I saw," she said. "You had no idea what you were—" He stopped. Whatever he was going to say, he caught it before it came out, and that catching was more revealing than anything he might have said. He straightened his jacket. He looked at the 2 security personnel. "Wait in the hall," he said. They went. Cole did not leave. He stood in the room for a moment, and Mara watched him run the arithmetic of his situation and arrive at an answer he didn't like, and she watched him decide that the best available move was to become very cooperative very quickly. "What do you need from me?" he said. It was directed at Hartman. "Access to the full security footage archive for floors 3 through 5 for the past 10 days, Hartman said. "Unedited. The original files, not the processed version." Cole nodded. "The personnel file and building access record for Marcus Tolliver." Another nod. "And whoever currently has possession of the items from last night's 5:15 a.m. loading dock shipment needs to be located, and those items need to be preserved immediately." Cole's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll need you to make those calls from this room," Hartman said. in front of Dr. Ferris. And to his credit, or perhaps to the credit of whatever Cole had calculated in the last 30 seconds, he took out his phone and he started making calls. The toxicologist worked quietly in the room while Cole made his calls. Ferris had gloves on now, and she was doing a methodical external examination of the pillow currently on the headboard, feeling along the seams, pressing the fill at intervals, using a small handheld UV light that she'd pulled from the messenger bag. Lily watched her from the chair with the exhausted attention of someone who has been waiting for this for so long that watching it happen felt slightly unreal. "It's in there," Lily said. Not a question. Ferris looked at her over the pillow. "What makes you say that?" "Because it's the same pillow, different case, same weight. I can feel the difference when it's against my neck." She touched her collar. "And my neck already started burning this morning, before you got here." Ferris went back to work. She found the seam modification in 7 minutes, not at the standard closure point, but along the interior baffle, a section of the inner casing that had been opened and resealed with a stitch that was close but not identical to the factory pattern. She pointed it out to Mara without touching it further. Mara looked. The stitching was neat. Someone who could sew, not professionally, but carefully. Someone who had taken their time. "What's in it?" Lily asked. Ferris sat back. She looked at Hartman, who had finished his third phone call and was standing near the window. He gave a slight nod. "We believe it's a processed marine cnidarian filament," Ferris said, "specifically from a species in the Physalia family. The tentacle cells, nematocysts, can retain their discharge mechanism for weeks after harvesting if preserved correctly. When they come into sustained contact with skin, particularly thin skin over vascular areas," she glanced at Lily's neck, "they trigger a localized envenomation. Repeated exposure compounds the effect." Lily was quiet for a moment. "So every night I was sleeping against something that was stinging me." "Yes. And it would have kept doing that until the cellular structures degraded, which, depending on preparation method, could take another 2 to 3 weeks. Lily sat with that for a moment. Then she said, with the particular flat affect of someone who has just had the worst version of what they suspected confirmed, "I knew it wasn't anxiety." "No," Ferris said, "it wasn't." The NCIS investigators arrived at 11:47 a.m., not within the hour Hartman had cited, which in Mara's experience of how these things actually worked was not surprising. There were 2 of them, both in civilian clothes, both with the precise, unhurried manner of people who had done this long enough to know that urgency without preparation was just noise. They spoke with Hartman in the hallway for 11 minutes. They spoke with Ferris. They looked at Mara's tablet documentation with the specific attention of people who understood what they were looking at. One of them, a woman named Reyes, who had introduced herself with a badge and a surname only, came to where Mara was standing near the window at the far end of the hall. "You're the nurse who initiated contact," Reyes said. "Yes." "Walk me through the timeline, from the beginning." Mara walked her through it, all of it, in order, with the same precision she'd used writing it down. The initial patient interaction, the neck findings, the pillow weight, the security footage gaps, Tolliver's presence in the room, the loading dock, the van, the photographs, the administrative override badge access at 8:17 a.m. She spoke without looking at her notes because she had written the notes carefully enough that she knew them. Reyes listened without interrupting. At the end, she said, "You called Hartman's contact directly, not local law enforcement, not hospital administration, not the state health board." "I called someone I knew had the standing to move quickly," Mara said. "I tried the chain of command the previous evening. It told me to keep my notes to myself." Reyes looked at her with the particular assessment that people use when they are trying to place you in a category that the available categories don't quite cover. "What's your background, Miss Solis?" "Solis. I'm a floor nurse." "Before that." She looked at Reyes for a moment. "Before that is a longer conversation." Reyes almost smiled. Almost. "Fair enough." She looked down at her notepad. "The Tolliver question. You built that connection from public records, a county property search, and a newspaper archive." "And the employment start date," Mara said. He came to Harlow Valley 3 months after the Board of Inquiry proceeding. The timing isn't proof, but it's a pattern. We've been pulling his background since about 6 this morning, Reyes said. You're not wrong about the timing. She clicked her pen. His father was Captain David Tolliver, Navy, killed during a rescue operation in 2009. The board found no negligence on the part of the mission commander. The mission commander was a Navy lieutenant commander named Garrett Hartman. Mara took that in. Tolliver blamed him. For 17 years, Reyes said, and then Hartman's daughter ended up admitted to the same hospital where Tolliver had taken a job. Not coincidence. No. And Cole? Reyes's expression became slightly more careful. That's an active part of the investigation. What I can tell you is that the loading dock shipment from last night is currently in the custody of federal agents. The van was stopped at a distribution facility in Mill Haven, about 40 miles south. The pillow from the van is being processed right now. Mara felt something release in her chest that she hadn't fully noticed had been held tight. The pillow was in custody. Whatever happened next, that piece existed. Tolliver? She asked. Not currently located, Reyes said. He didn't come in for his shift today. His vehicle is gone from his registered address. She looked at Mara. That's why I need you to stay available. We may need you to confirm details quickly. I'm not going anywhere, Mara said. At 12:30 p.m., the situation on the 4th floor changed character in the way situations do when they stop being managed locally and become something else entirely. 2 more federal personnel arrived. A representative from the State Department of Health appeared. A man in a gray suit who went immediately into a conference room with Cole and did not come out for 40 minutes. The floor had the particular electric stillness of a space where something large was happening on the other side of doors, the kind of collective held breath that every staff member on the floor could feel without being told anything specific. Tomas charted with the focus of someone trying very hard to behave normally. The afternoon nurses who had come on looked at each other in the particular language of people who did not know what was happening, and had decided that asking questions was probably not the right move. Mara sat in a chair in the hallway near 414, which was not comfortable and was not a thing a person off shift would typically do, and she did not care. She had been awake for almost 30 hours. She was running on the specific kind of fuel that takes over when you're past the point where normal energy applies. Not adrenaline exactly, more the kind of focused calm that she recognized from other contexts without wanting to name them. At 1:15 p.m., Reyes came back to her with a face that had changed slightly, not alarmed, but sharp in a new way. "We have a problem," Reyes said. "What kind?" "The second pillow. The one placed at 8:17 this morning by the override badge. Dr. Ferris has completed the external assessment. Same modification. Same seam location. Same internal structure." Mara went still. "The clean pillow." "Wasn't clean," Reyes said. "Whoever came in this morning with that override badge wasn't swapping in a clean pillow to cover the evidence. They were swapping in a fresh one." She looked at Mara. "Lily slept against the first pillow for 6 nights. The exposure level we're dealing with now, whatever she accumulated this morning before you had your colleague move her to the chair, that's a medical situation." Mara was already standing. "How long was she in the bed this morning before Tomas moved her?" "She told us approximately 2 hours." 2 hours. Against a fresh source. Mara thought about the lymphatic pathway, the skin over the left neck and shoulder, the cumulative inflammation from 6 days of prior exposure creating heightened permeability. "She needs labs right now," Mara said. "Full panel. Inflammatory markers, histamine, tryptase, C-reactive protein. And someone needs to look at her neck again with that in mind, not as a dermatological complaint, but as an envenomation case. Can you manage that?" "I need to be back on shift." Reyes looked at her. "I'll make a call." "Now," Mara said. "Not in 10 minutes." Reyes made the call. It took 4 minutes. At the end of it, she looked at Mara and said, "You're on, Boad." Mara went into 414 with the focused attention of someone who has shifted from investigator to clinician, which required a different set of priorities to move to the front. She looked at Lily with clinical eyes. The girl looked tired. Not dramatically worse than earlier, but the flush along the left side of her neck had deepened in the last 2 hours, and her skin over the left shoulder had the slightly raised look of tissue that was reacting to something. "Lily," she said, "I need to draw some blood." "Okay," Lily said without asking why, because she had spent 6 days in a hospital where nobody explained anything to her, and she had learned to accept whatever was offered. "This time I'll tell you what I'm looking for," Mara said, and she did. A specific set of markers that would tell them how her immune system had responded to repeated low-dose exposure, what the inflammatory load looked like, whether there was any indication of systemic involvement beyond the local skin reaction. She drew the blood herself. She logged it with the specific documentation language of an envenomation case, which was different from the dermatological language that had been in Lily's chart for 6 days, and she walked it to the lab personally and had a conversation with the lab supervisor that ended with a 2-hour turnaround rather than the standard 6. When she came back to the floor, Hartman was in the hallway outside 414. He was on the phone, speaking in the quiet, controlled way of someone receiving information they had been waiting for. He ended the call and looked at her. "Tolliver," he said. She waited. "They found the car, abandoned at a rest stop on the 101, about 80 miles south of Creston Falls." He paused. He wasn't in it. She thought about what that meant. A man who had spent 17 years building towards something, who had put that thing into motion in a hospital room over 6 nights, who had been identified and cornered by a situation he hadn't fully anticipated. A man like that, finding out that federal investigators were in the building and the evidence was already in custody. "He's running," she said. "Yes." Hartman looked at the window at the end of the hall, the gray Oregon sky beyond it. Or he's already somewhere they haven't thought to look yet. She thought about the loading dock, the van, the facilities management office, the building she had been in for 2 years, with its storage corridors and its service elevators and its loading bays and its 11 floors of mostly unused administrative space above 8. She looked at Hartman. "When did they find the car?" she asked. 40 minutes ago. "He left the car 80 miles away. That's a 90-minute drive from here at minimum, and that's if he went straight there." She did the math. He would have had to leave before 6 this morning to be 80 miles out and abandon the car within a timing that makes sense. Hartman was watching her. "But someone used an administrative override badge to access room 414 at 8:17 a.m., she said, "and placed a fresh pillow, 2 hours after a car that's supposedly his would have already been driving away." Hartman pulled out his phone. "Either Tolliver didn't drive that car," she said, "or someone else placed the pillow this morning." "Or both," Hartman said, already dialing. She looked at the door of room 414. Lily was behind it, with Ferris and the man with military posture, and the second pillow was in Ferris's custody now, sealed in an evidence bag, and the bed had been stripped to the mattress. The room was safe. But the building had 11 floors, and a service corridor on every one of them, and a man who knew this hospital's layout well enough to move through it at 2 in the morning without a second thought was either 80 miles away or not. Reyes appeared at the end of the hallway, moving fast, phone against her ear. She made eye contact with Mara from 30 feet away, and something in her expression sent a pulse of cold through the back of Mara's neck. Reyes reached them and lowered the phone. "Security just flagged an unauthorized badge access on floor 7, she said. "Service corridor. The badge used was Marcus Tolliver's." A beat of silence. 30 seconds ago, Reyes said. Mara looked at the ceiling as if she could see through it to the floor above, and thought about a man with 17 years of grievance and nothing left to lose, in a building he knew better than most of the people currently trying to find him. He had not run. He was still here. He was still here. Those 3 words landed differently than the abstract version of the same information would have. Tolliver was not a name on a file or a figure on a loading dock anymore. He was a body in a building, 1 floor up, moving through a corridor that Mara knew the layout of because she had spent 2 years memorizing the physical grammar of this place the way she memorized everything. Not deliberately, just as a function of the part of her brain that never fully switched off. Reyes was already talking into her phone, using the clipped language of someone coordinating people in multiple locations simultaneously. Hartman had moved 3 steps down the hall toward the elevator before he stopped, because going up personally was not his call to make, and he knew it. And knowing it didn't make standing still any easier. Mara looked at the ceiling again. 7th floor. Service corridor. The 7th floor was the oncology unit, Lower census than surgical recovery, different staff pattern, quieter in the afternoon. The service corridor on 7 ran the same east-west axis as the one on every floor, connecting the central elevator bank to the exterior stairwells and the utility access points. She knew what was up there because she had covered an oncology shift once, 14 months ago, when the unit was short-staffed and her charge nurse at the time had volunteered her name without asking. The utility access points on 7 included a mechanical room with roof access. She said it before she fully decided to say it. The mechanical room on 7 has a roof hatch. Reyes looked at her mid-sentence on the phone. If he's heading for the service corridor, there's a mechanical room at the east end. It has roof access. The hatch opens onto the equipment platform on the north face of the building. She paused. It's not a great exit, but it exists. Reyes relayed this. Then she looked at Mara. How do you know the building layout that well? I pay attention to things, Mara said. Reyes went back to the phone. In the room behind them, Ferris appeared in the doorway with a question forming on her face, and Hartman answered it in 2 words and a gesture that meant stay inside, and Ferris went back in. The elevator at the end of the hall opened and 2 people Mara hadn't seen before came out. Not in uniform, but moving with the coordinated efficiency of a team that had been briefed in transit. They went to Reyes. Brief exchange. Then they went to the stairwell door, not the elevator, and pushed through it. The floor went quiet in the specific way it does when something is happening somewhere else, and everyone in the immediate space is holding themselves still in response to a situation they can't see. Tomas was at the nursing station, not pretending to chart anymore, just sitting and watching the stairwell door. Mara walked to him. If anyone from administration comes to this floor in the next 30 minutes and asks to access 414, call Reyes first. Before you let anyone through. Her number, she wrote it on a post-it from his station, is right here. Okay, he said. Then quietly, is he in the building? Yes, he nodded, stuck the post-it to the edge of his monitor, said nothing else, which was the right call. It took 11 minutes. Mara knew this because she was watching the clock on the nursing station wall, not because she had any useful way to measure the texture of those 11 minutes, which was the specific kind of time that doesn't compress or stretch, but simply sits there in its full dimension while you wait for it to end. At 1:42 p.m., Reyes's phone rang. She answered it, listened for 20 seconds, and her posture changed in a way that meant the variable had resolved. She crossed the hall to where Mara and Hartman were standing. He's in custody, she said. East stairwell, 6th floor. He didn't make the roof. Hartman closed his eyes for 1 second. Only one. Is he talking? He asked. Not yet. Reyes looked at the floor, then back up. He had something on him. A phone, prepaid, recent call history. We're pulling the numbers now. She paused. One of the numbers in the recent calls is a Harlow Valley Medical Center extension. The hallway was quiet. Which extension? Mara asked. That's what we're determining. Reyes looked at Hartman. But it's not the facilities department. The extension took 40 minutes to trace through the hospital's internal phone directory, which was longer than it should have taken, and shorter than Cole's legal team, when they arrived at 3:15 p.m., would have preferred. The attorney, a woman named Sandra Pritch, who wore the expression of someone performing calm, went directly to Cole's office on 5 and was still there when the state investigator from the Department of Health reappeared from his own 40-minute conference and knocked on the same door. Mara was not in Cole's office. She was on the 4th floor, where she had asked to remain because Lily's lab results were due at 3:30, and she was not willing to not be present for them. She was also, if she was honest with herself, too tired to walk anywhere that wasn't directly necessary, and too wired to sit down for more than 4 minutes at a time, and managing these 2 conflicting states by moving in small circuits between the nursing station, the hallway outside 414, and the window at the east end of the floor that looked out over the parking structure and, beyond it, the low gray-green hills of Creston Falls in the early afternoon. The lab results came at 3:22. She read them at the workstation with the focused attention of someone who knows what they're looking at. Elevated serum tryptase, not critically, but above the reference range in a way that was significant given the context. CRP elevated at 2.3 times normal. Histamine levels showing the profile of recent mast cell activation. The CBC showed mild eosinophilia, not dramatic, but directionally consistent with repeated allergen exposure over time. None of it was immediately life-threatening. All of it was real. She printed the results. She walked into 414 and handed them to Ferris, who read them with a specific quality of attention that meant she was correlating them against something she already knew. She needs antihistamine therapy and a course of corticosteroids, Ferris said. And I'd like a repeat tryptase at 24 hours to check the trend. She looked at Lily. Have you had any trouble swallowing? Tightness in your chest? No, Lily said. Just the burning. And I've been tired. The fatigue is consistent, Ferris said. She looked at Mara. Can we get this ordered? I'll get the attending, Mara said. The attending was not Dr. Ashford, who had signed off on anxiety and gone home, but the afternoon medical supervisor, a physician named Dr. Ren Okafor, who had arrived on shift that morning to find federal investigators on 2 floors and had responded to this information with the adaptive equanimity of someone who had been in medicine long enough to know that the correct response to a situation you didn't cause was simply to do your job well. Okafor reviewed the labs, reviewed Ferris's findings, asked 4 precise questions about exposure duration and symptom progression, and had the medication orders in the system in under 15 minutes. I want her on monitoring, Okafor said to Mara. Vitals every 2 hours. Any respiratory change, any new systemic symptom, I want to know immediately. Yes, Mara said. And someone needs to document this formally as an envenomation case and initiate the patient harm protocol. She looked at Mara with the particular directness of a physician who has just understood the shape of what she's stepped into. You've been documenting this from the beginning. Yes. Then you should be the one to initiate it. Okafor paused. For what it's worth, the chart on this patient is a document of institutional failure. Whatever happened before I got here, I want you to know I'm reading it. It was not a dramatic statement. It was a precise one, and precision, Mara had found, was usually worth more. Thank you, she said. At 4:45 p.m., Reyes came back to the 4th floor with a different energy than she'd had before. Not faster exactly, but with a specific forward quality that meant she had something. The extension on Tolliver's phone, she said. It's registered to the Patient Care Operations Office, but the physical handset it routes to is in a secondary office on the 5th floor, administrative wing. She looked at Mara. It's assigned to the Director of Compliance and Internal Review. Mara absorbed this. Who is that? A man named Dean Pollard. He's been in the role for 6 years. Prior to Harlow Valley, he worked at a hospital in coastal Washington that had a patient complaint investigation 3 years into his tenure. She paused. The investigation was related to suppression of adverse event documentation. He came here from that. He was not named directly in the findings. He left the position 2 months after the investigation concluded. Mara thought about the administrative override badge access at 8:17 a.m. The compliance director would have override access to any room in the building. That was the nature of the role. Internal review required the ability to access any patient area for audit purposes. It was the cleanest possible cover for what had been done that morning. Has he been located? She asked. He called in sick today, Reyes said. His office is empty. We're pulling his building access history now. She looked at Mara with an expression that was not quite admiration, more the specific acknowledgement of someone who has been proven correct in their initial read of a situation. Your documentation of the access badge this morning gave us the window we needed. Without that timestamp, Pollard's building access record wouldn't have meant anything specific. With it, it places him in the building, on that floor, during that exact window. Is Cole connected to Pollard? Mara asked. They have a documented supervisory relationship, and the security footage, the gaps you identified. Those deletion requests came from an account in the compliance office. Reyes paused. Cole may not have known exactly what Pollard was doing, or he knew enough not to ask questions. We're still building that picture. The difference between those two things would matter considerably for what came next, and Mara understood that determining it was not her job. Her job had been to document what she saw and make sure it reached the people with the authority to act on it. That part, at least, was done. Month. Harrison Cole resigned his position at 5:30 p.m. Mara learned this the way most of the hospital staff learned it, through the particular speed of institutional rumor, which moves faster through a building than any formal communication system. Tomas told her he had heard it from the afternoon charge nurse on 3, who had heard it from someone in the administrative wing who had watched Cole's secretary carrying a box out of the 5th-floor office toward the elevator. Cole had not been arrested. Not yet. The investigation was active and the legal picture was still developing, and whether he faced criminal charges or professional consequences or both was a question that would take longer than an afternoon to resolve. But he had resigned, which meant that whatever calculation he had been running since 10:08 a.m. had arrived at the conclusion that the institution he had managed for 19 years was no longer a position he could hold. Mara thought about the man who had stood in her line of sight at the nursing station 10 hours ago and told her to keep her notes where they were. She thought about the way he had looked at her this morning in room 414 when she hadn't moved. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired, and she felt something more complicated than satisfaction, which was the recognition that the thing she had spent 36 hours trying to make happen had happened, and that it hadn't been clean, and that it had taken longer and required more than it should have, and that a girl had spent 6 nights sleeping against something that was slowly poisoning her while the people responsible for her safety decided that management was more important than medicine. That was the reality of it. The triumph, if there was any, lived alongside that. She was standing at the window at the end of the 4th-floor hallway when Hartman found her. He stood beside her for a moment, looking at the same gray-green hills and the parking structure and the beginning of the evening light coming in at a low angle from the west. "She's going to be okay," he said. "Not a question. The labs are where we want them. The treatment is in. Okafor knows what she's doing." Mara paused. "She should have been treated 3 days ago." "Yes," he said. He didn't offer anything to soften it, which she respected. "What happens to Tolliver?" she asked. "Federal charges, multiple counts. The NCIS has the pillow and the evidence from the van. Ferris's report will document the method and the intent." He was quiet for a moment. He spent 17 years on this, building toward it, waiting. "Does he know it didn't work?" "He will," Hartman said. "When he's in front of a federal judge and Lily testifies and the lab results are entered into evidence, he'll know exactly what he accomplished." She looked at the hills. "He blamed you for his father," she said. "Yes." "Were you responsible?" A long pause. Not the pause of someone avoiding the question, the pause of someone who has sat with the question for a long time and has an answer that isn't simple. "The mission went wrong," Hartman said. "People died. I made decisions under conditions where every available option had a cost. The board reviewed it and made their finding." He exhaled. "That doesn't mean I don't think about Captain Tolliver. I think about him." He stopped. "I also think about the 4 men who came back because of the decisions I made that night. Both things are true." Mara nodded. She understood the arithmetic of those kinds of decisions better than she would say here, in a hospital hallway, to a man she had met that morning. They stood at the window for another minute. Then Hartman straightened his jacket. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and you don't have to answer." "Okay." "The call you made last night, the contact, your background." He looked at her steadily. "I made some inquiries this morning while everything was happening. I got a partial picture." She waited. "You didn't leave the military," he said. "The military let you go. Medical discharge." She kept her face even. "That's accurate. And then you ended up here, quiet floor. Nobody noticing you." "That was the idea," she said. He nodded slowly. "The idea worked," he said, "until it didn't need to anymore." She almost said something to that. Instead, she looked at the window and thought about the shape of the last 2 years. The careful ordinariness of it, the specific discipline of becoming someone no one looked at twice, and how completely that had failed to be what she'd planned it to be when a girl in room 414 looked at her and said, "You want me to explain it again?" with the voice of someone who had stopped expecting to be heard. "Reyes is going to need a formal statement from you," Hartman said. "Full background, all of it." "I know. It'll become part of the record." "I know that too." He looked at her for a moment. "Are you all right with that?" She considered the question honestly. 2 years of careful quiet and 1 night of not being quiet. And now the record would have her name in it. Not the floor nurse version of her name, but the full version. The one with the prior service history and the clearances and the other context that she had been keeping folded up and stored somewhere private since the discharge paperwork. "I'll be all right with it," she said. "It's just a different kind of visible." At 6:20 p.m., Dean Pollard was located. He had not gone far, which in retrospect made sense, because running was not the calculus of someone who had spent 6 years as a compliance director and believed that the problem was a floor nurse with a tablet and a set of timestamps. What Pollard had done in the hours since the federal investigators arrived was retain counsel, go to a coffee shop 4 blocks from the hospital, and wait to see how the situation resolved, apparently operating on the assumption that the case against him was thin enough that he could navigate it. The case against him was not thin. The building access record placed him in room 414 at 8:17 a.m. with an administrative override badge. The security footage that had been deleted, the gaps Mara had identified on day 1, had been deleted using an account that traced to the compliance office. The phone extension on Tolliver's prepaid device was the handset in Pollard's secondary office. And when NCIS pulled Pollard's own call records, they found 11 contacts with Tolliver's personal number over the preceding 2 months, beginning 3 weeks after Lily Hartman was admitted. He had known. Not initially. The admission was too recent for him to have been part of the original plan. But at some point in the first weeks of Lily's stay, Pollard had learned what Tolliver was doing and had made a calculation about what to do with that knowledge. He had decided to protect it. Whether it was personal loyalty, some connection to Tolliver that predated Harlow Valley, or simply the institutional reflex of a man who had built his career on making problems disappear, that was a question for the investigation. What was no longer a question was whether he had done it. Reyes told Mara this at the nursing station, with the flat directness that characterized everything she communicated. "He's being brought in now," Reyes said. "He'll be processed at the federal building downtown. Formal charges pending the completed evidence review, but the DA's office has indicated they're moving forward." Mara received this without visible reaction. "Cole?" she asked. Still cooperating with investigators, his resignation doesn't insulate him from anything, but the picture of his involvement is different from Pollard's. Whether he knew specifically what Pollard was doing versus looking away from what Pollard was doing, that distinction matters legally. Reyes paused. His attorney is making the case that it's the latter, and the board will decide if that's enough. The board and eventually a jury if it comes to that. Reyes clicked her pen. "Your documentation of the Cole conversation, the 10:15 p.m. interaction, is part of the record. His instruction to keep your notes to yourself, combined with the evidence of Pollard's subsequent actions, creates a timeline that will be difficult for his attorney to explain cleanly." Mara thought about that conversation. "I would strongly recommend that whatever you've been writing in that tablet stays where it is and doesn't become a problem for anyone." She had written it down within minutes of it happening. "I need your full formal statement tonight," Reyes said, "including the background information." "I'll be here," Mara said. Reyes nodded and started to move, then stopped. She turned back. "For what it's worth," Reyes said, "most people in your position, with the access restrictions, the administrative pressure, the paid leave offer, most people go home." Mara looked at her. "I know. Why didn't you?" She thought about how to answer that. She thought about the marks on Lily's neck that everybody had looked at and decided meant something clinical rather than something deliberate. She thought about the specific quality of exhaustion in an 18-year-old girl's voice when she said, "I knew I wasn't." 3 words that contained all of it: the insistence and the isolation and the 6 days of not being believed. Because she was right, Mara said, and she knew she was right, and she needed one person to act like that mattered. Reyes held her gaze for a moment, then she nodded and left. At 7:40 p.m., Mara was in the middle of giving Reyes her formal statement in the small conference room on the 4th floor, the one normally used for care plan meetings, with its laminate table and its motivational poster about teamwork that someone had put up years ago and no one had ever taken down. When the door opened, it was Tomas. He looked like someone who had been trying to decide whether to interrupt for several minutes and had finally concluded that he should. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's Lily." Mara was already standing. "What happened?" "She's asking for you. Tomas hesitated. "She's not in distress, medically. But she's upset and she's not talking to her father or Dr. Okafor. She's asking for you specifically." Reyes made a small gesture that meant go. Mara went down the hall and pushed through the door of 414. The room was quiet. Hartman was in the corner chair, giving his daughter space, which meant he had already tried to help and found that helping was not what she needed from him right now. Okafor had been and gone. The medication was running through the IV line, and the vitals on the monitor looked stable. Lily was sitting up in bed, arms around her knees, looking at the window. When she heard Mara come in, she turned. "They told me what was in the pillow," she said. "I know," Mara said, and pulled the chair to the bedside and sat down. "They told me he came to get my father. Not me specifically, but—" She stopped. "I was the way to get to him. I was just—" She couldn't finish it. Mara didn't try to hand her a better version of that sentence. There wasn't one. "You kept telling them something was wrong," Mara said, "for 6 days, in a place where everything was designed to make you doubt yourself. And you didn't stop." "I almost did," Lily said quietly. "The 4th night, I almost just let them give me the medication and stopped fighting it. But you didn't." "No." She looked at her hands. "Because it was real. I knew it was real." "That matters," Mara said. "What you did, staying with what you knew, that's not a small thing." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at Mara with the direct, undecorated gaze of someone asking a genuine question. "Who are you?" she said. "Not, I know you're a nurse, but who are you? Because nobody else in this building acted the way you did, and I've been trying to figure out why." Mara held her gaze. It was a fair question. It was, in fact, the question that Reyes's formal statement process was going to answer tonight in a conference room down the hall, and that the investigation record would answer in a way that would become available eventually to anyone who knew where to look. She was deciding how much of that to say when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was a number she didn't recognize. Oregon area code, but the text was from Reyes's number, forwarded. "Tolliver is talking. Requesting contact with medical staff. Says there's something about the patient's condition that the investigators don't know. Says it's urgent." She read it twice. Then she looked at Lily and at the IV line running clean into her arm and at the monitor showing stable vitals, and she thought about a man with 17 years of preparation and nothing left to lose, currently in federal custody 2 miles away, suddenly deciding he had something urgent to say about a girl's medical condition. Either it was manipulation, a tactic to create contact, to delay processing, to introduce confusion. Or it wasn't. She texted back. "What specifically did he say?" The response took 45 seconds. He said, "They only found one." Mara stared at the screen. One pillow. There had been 2 pillows in the sequence, the original that ended up in the loading dock van, and the replacement placed by Pollard at 8:17 a.m. Both were accounted for. Both were in evidence custody. 1. She looked up at the room, at the stripped bed, at the bare mattress, at the bed frame. She stood up. She stood up and moved to the bed frame before she fully articulated why, working on the logic her body had already completed before her conscious reasoning caught up. The frame was standard hospital issue, tubular steel, powder-coated white, a headboard panel, and a footboard connected by 2 side rails. She had seen 1,000 of them. She had worked around them, moved them, adjusted their height settings without ever looking at them the way she was looking at this one now. The headboard was hollow. Most hospital headboards were the design accommodated medical gas connections, call light routing, the infrastructure of a room that needed to be reconfigured for different patients. This one had a panel on the back face, the side that pressed against the wall, with 2 small utility access ports that were standard on this model. She moved the headboard away from the wall. Not far. 6 inches, enough to see behind it. Tucked between the panel and the wall, held there by the frame's own pressure, was a small sealed pouch. Flat. maybe 4 inches square. The material was a heavy plastic, heat-sealed at the edges, and through the translucent surface she could see the same fibrous pale material she had identified in the pillow seam examination. She did not touch it. She stepped back and called Reyes directly. "Fourth floor," she said when Reyes picked up. "Room 414, behind the headboard. You need Ferris up here now." Reyes asked no clarifying questions. That was one of the things about her. She had understood from the first conversation how to read the register of Mara's voice. Mara stood in the room with her arms at her sides, not touching anything, and looked at Lily, who had been watching all of this from the bed, with the expression of someone who has learned, over the past 6 days, that something is always worse than the previous version of worse. "There's something behind the headboard," Lily said. "Yes. He put it there. Or Pollard did during the 817 access this morning," Mara said. "We don't know yet which one." Lily looked at the headboard. Then she looked at Mara. "So even with the pillows gone, even with everything you found, he still had a contingency," Mara said. "Yes." Lily absorbed this with the flat, exhausted acceptance of someone who has had the floor drop out from under them enough times in the past week that they have developed a relationship with the sensation. "Is it over now?" she asked. "Getting there," Mara said. Ferris arrived in 4 minutes with an evidence kit and the particular focused energy of a scientist who has just been handed the most important sample of the current case. She photographed the pouch in situ, documented its position relative to the headboard, the wall, and the floor, and removed it with forceps into a sealed container. She worked without commentary until she was done, and then she looked at Mara with an expression that was precise and unambiguous. "This is the most concentrated preparation I've seen in this case," she said. "If this had been introduced to the patient's environment in the way the others were, the accumulated exposure on top of 6 days of prior sensitization..." She stopped. Let the math speak for itself. Mara understood the math. She had understood it the moment she read Tolliver's message. A sensitized immune system, already primed by repeated exposure, encountering a higher concentration source. The progression from localized reaction to systemic response. The tryptase levels that were already elevated. The pouch behind the headboard was not a backup plan. It was the final phase of one. Reyes was on the phone with the Federal Processing Facility before Ferris had finished sealing the container. What followed was not a clean unraveling. It never was. Mara knew this from experience, the way that institutional accountability, when it finally came, arrived less as a reckoning and more as a slow, grinding series of documented consequences that looked nothing like the justice that people imagined when they used that word. It was paperwork, it was legal filings, it was investigators in conference rooms and attorneys making calls, and a process that would stretch across months before it reached anything like resolution. But the immediate shape of it was clear enough. Marcus Tolliver, when confronted with the evidence from the headboard pouch and informed that the federal case now included documented premeditation and an escalating harm timeline, stopped calculating and started talking. Not out of remorse, Mara did not believe, based on everything she had come to understand about him in the past 36 hours, that remorse was available to him on the subject of Lily Hartman. He talked because he was a man who had spent 17 years in service of a specific idea, and that idea had now been dismantled completely, and talking was the only remaining thing he could do. He confirmed the timeline. He had taken the position at Harlow Valley 8 months before Lily's admission, after identifying the hospital as a facility where Garrett Hartman's family had used services in the past. The admission had been coincidence, a coincidence he had then decided to use. He had developed the method over months, sourcing the cyanidarian material through channels that the investigators were already tracing. He had approached Dean Pollard 6 weeks into Lily's admission, after Pollard had encountered the beginning of a complaint trail and come to Tolliver to manage it. The conversation between them had ended with Pollard becoming a participant rather than a witness. Dean Pollard, when the federal agents arrived at the coffee shop 4 blocks from the hospital and presented him with the call record evidence and the building access timeline, retained his composure for approximately 40 minutes. His attorney made the appropriate statements. Then the investigators put the headboard pouch documentation in front of him and told him that the charge profile had changed and Pollard's composure left him in the specific way that composure does when the gap between what you believed was survivable and what is actually happening becomes too wide to bridge. He did not cry. He just stopped performing calm, and what was underneath it was a man who had spent 6 years making institutional problems disappear and had made the fundamental error of believing that skill transferred to criminal situations. It did not. Harrison Cole was not charged, not with anything criminal. The investigation established that his knowledge of Pollard's specific actions had been what his attorney argued, willful ignorance rather than active participation. He had created conditions where Pollard could operate. He had suppressed the complaint trail without knowing exactly what was underneath it. Whether that distinction was morally meaningful was a question the law answered differently than Mara would have answered it, and she understood that this was one of the places where the available outcome and the deserved outcome were not exactly the same shape. Cole's resignation stood. His professional license was placed under review by the State Health Board. The 19 years of commendations on his office wall belonged to a different institution now. Harlow Valley's board voted to restructure the patient care operations role entirely and appointed an interim director from outside the system. That was what accountability looked like in the language of institutions. Not perfect, not complete. Just the specific set of consequences that the available mechanisms could produce. Mara made her peace with the distance between perfect and available. She had made that kind of peace before. Doug. Lily's inflammatory markers peaked at 31 hours post-discovery and then began declining. The corticosteroid course worked the way it was supposed to work, which was to say, not dramatically. No single moment where the numbers turned and everyone in the room felt the shift, but steadily, in the incremental way that real clinical improvement always happened, one lab value at a time, one vitals check at a time. On the third morning after the headboard discovery, Lily ate breakfast without nausea for the first time since admission. She reported that the burning sensation had dropped from a constant presence to an intermittent one. Okafor reviewed the morning labs and described the trend as encouraging without overselling it, which Lily appreciated because she had learned over the past 10 days to distrust overselling. Mara was not on shift that morning. She had taken 2 days off, not at Cole's direction because Cole was no longer in a position to direct anything, but because the interim director had quietly asked her to take whatever she needed and had said it without the transactional quality that the previous administration would have attached to it. She had slept for 11 hours the first night, which was the most she had slept consecutively in a week, and woken up in her apartment with the specific mental clarity that comes after the emergency has passed and your body finally believes it. She came back on her third day. She came back to the 4th floor, which looked the same as it always had. Same fluorescent light, same smell of antiseptic and recycled air, same cart of supplies by the nursing station, but felt different in the specific way that spaces feel different after something has happened in them that rearranged the truth of the place. Tomas was at the station. He looked at her when she came through. "Welcome back," he said. "Thanks," she said, and meant it simply. She checked her assignment. She did her rounds. She was 20 minutes into her first medication pass when she heard Lily's call light from 414, and she finished the current patient before she went down the hall, because that was how you worked a floor. No single patient above the system, no matter what. When she walked into 414, Lily was sitting up, not in distress, just awake with a particular alertness that Mara recognized as different from the exhausted watchfulness of the previous week. "I wanted to tell you something," Lily said, "before I go home." They said maybe tomorrow. Mara pulled the chair over and sat down. "I've been thinking about what I'm going to say when people ask me what happened," Lily said, "because they're going to ask. My friends, my mom's family, people at school, and the story sounds like something that doesn't happen to real people. A guy hiding something in my pillow for revenge on my dad. A nurse who figured it out at 2 a.m. She looked at Mara. "It sounds like a movie." "It happened," Mara said. "It was real." "I know." Lily was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about day 3, when I'd been telling the doctors for 2 days and they kept writing anxiety in my chart, and I started to think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it really is in my head, because that's what happens when enough people in authority tell you something. You start to absorb it, even when you know it's not true. She paused. And I almost stopped. I almost just let them treat me for anxiety and went home. But you didn't. No, but not because I was brave. I was terrified. I kept going because I couldn't find a version of the truth where I was wrong. And that's different from brave. She looked at Mara steadily. You're the one who is brave. I was just stubborn. Mara considered this. Being stubborn about something true is its own kind of courage, she said. Don't downgrade what you did. Lily almost smiled. Almost. My dad told me who you were, what your background is. He said I should know. I figured he would. Why didn't you tell me yourself when I asked? Mara looked at her hands. She thought about how to say it honestly, without making it into something cleaner than it was. Because for the past 2 years, I've been trying to be someone nobody needed to look at twice, she said. And the night I called my contact and set all of this in motion, I knew that was over. I was still getting used to it. Lily looked at her with the direct gaze of someone 18 years old who had not yet learned to accept evasion as wisdom. Why were you hiding? She asked. It was the most direct version of the question anyone had asked. Reyes had asked about her background in terms of documentation. Hartman had asked about it in terms of institutional record. Lily was asking about the human part underneath both of those. I left the military because of an injury, Mara said. And when you leave something that was most of what you were, and the leaving wasn't your choice, you spend a while not knowing what you are instead. And quiet feels safer than visible when you're in the middle of that. Lily nodded. She didn't offer a resolution or a reframe, she just received it. I'm glad you weren't quiet that night, she said. So am I, Mara said. Belatedly. 3 weeks after Lily Hartman was discharged from Harlow Valley Medical Center, Marcus Tolliver was formally indicted on federal charges including aggravated assault, criminal conspiracy, and attempted murder. The indictment was 11 pages long. The evidence section ran to 43 exhibits. The pillow from the loading dock van, the replacement pillow from the headboard search, and the sealed pouch from behind the bed frame were all cataloged. Mara's documentation, the time-stamped notes, the photographs, the access log records, appeared as Exhibits 17 through 26. Dean Pollard was indicted separately 2 days later on charges including conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, obstruction of justice, and patient endangerment. He entered a not guilty plea through his attorney and then spent the following weeks watching his attorney's confidence visibly decrease as the evidence disclosure process continued. The State Health Board opened a formal investigation into Harlow Valley Medical Center's patient safety protocols, complaint suppression practices, and administrative oversight failures. The investigation was expected to take 8 months. The interim director cooperated without qualification and restructured the internal reporting chain within the first 2 weeks, eliminating the conditions under which a compliance director could unilaterally suppress adverse event documentation. It was not a perfect outcome. Cole was not charged. The 6 days during which Lily had been systematically harmed while the institution around her looked away were not erased by any of it. The patients before Lily, if there had been others, in other rooms, in other circumstances, in the years of a compliance director who made problems disappear, were not accounted for. Institutional memory was short, and institutional accountability was shorter. But Lily went home. The evidence existed. The charges were real. 2 men who had treated a girl's body as a vehicle for someone else's grievance were going to face a federal jury, and the nurse who had spent a night and a day documenting the truth of it in a tablet that she was told to keep where it was had made that possible. That was what available justice looked like. Mara knew it was not the same as complete justice. She had stopped expecting complete justice from systems that were designed by imperfect people to manage imperfect situations, and she had found that releasing that expectation did not mean accepting wrongdoing. It meant being clear-eyed about what you could actually accomplish, and then doing it anyway. The meeting with the interim director happened on a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after the indictments. His name was Bernard Wills, and he had the manner of someone who had come into a difficult situation with his eyes open and had decided that the most useful thing he could do was be straightforward. He had asked Mara to come to the 5th floor, which was the first time she had been in that wing for any reason other than a required administrative interaction. I've read everything, Wills said. The documentation, the investigation findings, the timeline, all of it. He looked at her across the table. I want to ask you something directly. Okay. Are you planning to stay? She had thought about this, not constantly, but enough to know that the answer wasn't obvious. That depends, she said. On what? On whether the things that made this possible, the complaint suppression, the administrative override access being used without audit, the footage gaps going unnoticed, whether those are being actually addressed or just documented. He nodded. Fair. He pushed a folder across the table. 3 structural changes that went into effect last week. Independent patient advocate position, reporting directly to the board, not to operations. Audit trail on all administrative badge access with automatic flag for patient room entries during non-clinical windows. And a de-escalation protocol for patient complaints that requires physician sign-off at the departmental level before an administrator can close a complaint. He looked at her. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. She looked at the folder. No, she said. It's not nothing. I want to offer you a formal role in the redesign of the patient safety protocols, he said. Not just nursing, the whole system. Your documentation practices, your pattern recognition approach, the way you triangulated the footage gaps with the access records. He paused. That thinking is not common. I'd like it inside the building's design rather than just being deployed when something has already gone wrong. She sat with that for a moment. The offer was real, and the man making it appeared to be genuine, which was a different experience than the last time she'd sat in this part of the building. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. She stood to go. At the door, she stopped. The patients who came through this floor in the years before I started, she said. Anyone who filed a complaint that went through Pollard's office, someone should look at those files. Wills's expression tightened slightly. Not defensiveness, recognition. That's already in the investigation scope. Good, she said, and left. She took the stairs down, not the elevator because she preferred the stairs. The fluorescent light in the stairwell was the same as it always was. One tube slightly dimmer than the others on the 3rd floor landing, a quality she had noticed months ago and mentioned in a maintenance request that had not yet been addressed. She made a mental note to follow up on it. That was the thing about the work. It was not heroic most of the time. It was following up on maintenance requests and checking vitals and catching the things that fell through cracks before they became the kind of emergency that required a 36-hour night and a federal investigation to address. The heroic moments were real, but they existed inside an enormous volume of ordinary attention, and the ordinary attention was what made the heroic moments possible. Mara had spent 2 years learning to live with the smaller version of herself that she had deliberately constructed, and she had found, at the end of a single night, that the smaller version had limits. Not failures, limits. The point at which what you had made yourself into was not sufficient for what the situation required. She did not know yet exactly who she was in the version of her life that came after this. The medical discharge had taken something from her that she would not get back, and the 2 years in the quiet of the 4th floor had been her way of sitting with that loss without fully facing it. Now the record had her full name in it. Now Lily Hartman knew who she was, and Reyes knew, and Hartman knew, and in time the people who read the investigation documents would know. That was a different kind of visible. She was finding, slowly, that it did not feel like exposure. It felt more like standing in a room with the lights on after a long time in partial dark. Uncomfortable at first, and then just true. She pushed through the stairwell door onto the 4th floor. The hallway was ordinary. Vitals carts, supply alcoves, the nurse's station with its monitors and its stacks of paper that nobody had managed to fully eliminate, despite 17 years of electronic records initiatives. Tomas at the desk, the afternoon charge nurse in the medication room, the ambient sound of a floor functioning the way a floor was supposed to function. She had a patient in 408 whose potassium levels had been trending low for 2 days and needed a conversation with the attending about the adjustment. She had a patient in 412 whose family had been asking questions about discharge planning that nobody had answered yet. She had a patient in 416 who was in pain and had been managing it quietly in the way that some people managed pain without complaint until someone noticed. She noticed. She walked to 416 first. That was the work. Not the night in the loading dock, not the phone call at 4:47 a.m., not the moment she moved the headboard away from the wall. Those things had mattered, and she would not diminish them. But the work was this: the hallway, the chart, the patient who was hurting and had not said so. The question asked in a room where the asking was the first step toward the answer. She had spent 2 years trying to make herself small enough that the weight of her previous life would stop pressing against the shape of the one she was trying to build. What she had learned in 36 hours was that the weight was not the problem. The problem had been believing that the things she'd carried, the pattern recognition, the tactical calm, the specific knowledge of what mattered in a crisis, were disqualifications from ordinary life rather than tools she had been issued without a clear understanding of where she would eventually need them. She had needed them in room 414 at 9:47 p.m. when a girl threw a pillow across the room and nobody in the doorway looked at what it meant. She had looked. That was not everything, but it was not nothing. And in the space between those two true things, there was enough room for whatever came next. She knocked on the door of 416 and went in and did her job.